My name is John. I'm a regular guy who happened to find my calling in life by trying different things. I never would have believed that I'd become part of something so big, but when it all started, it felt completely natural. I'll start from the beginning. Michelle and I met a few years ago through mutual friends at a party. It wasn't some grand moment the first time we met. We just clicked right away and kept the conversation going all evening. I remember thinking that this girl really stood out. Not in a negative way, but that she had a confident aura that few others did. I was drawn to her from the start. I was curious about what she was up to, and when I learned that she was doing video recordings, vlogging, and social media, I felt a certain admiration. After we'd met a few times, I realized that she had a talent for capturing people on screen. She already had a small following on various social platforms, but she mentioned that she wanted to grow. I, on the other hand, had mostly been tinkering with tech stuff as a hobby: cameras, audio recording, editing programs. So when she talked about her dreams of creating a large, popular video log, a spark was lit in me. I knew I could help. I could set up lighting, operate cameras, edit material, and all that. She was the star, and I was the one carrying the equipment, to put it bluntly. It was never an issue for me at the beginning, because it was so obvious that Michelle belonged in front of the camera far more than I did. She was good-looking, she expressed herself well, and she had a natural charisma. And I know how this industry works. She's a woman who's talented, funny, and social, and of course she attracts more followers than I could ever manage on my own. We soon decided to join forces and start a serious vlog together. She already had a small audience, and I had the know-how about how we could take it to the next level. It was exciting to watch how we slowly but surely grew into a fairly large online phenomenon. We started making regular posts about our travels, hotel visits, excursions, cooking, and life in general. In the beginning, the response was positive. I mean, we went from being two relatively unknown people to becoming a couple people recognized and talked about. Michelle loved the attention, and so did I. The only difference was that I was always most comfortable behind the scenes, so for me it was enough to know that I contributed in a big way to our mutual success. I was proud of our vlog and how we had built it ourselves, step by step. I remember that Michelle was incredibly driven at the start. We could sit up late at night planning the next episode, the next trip, the next hotel to review, or the next exciting activity to film. It felt like two best friends on a long adventure, and on top of that, we were a couple who had a ton of fun together. There was nothing indicating that anything would start to go wrong. Our intimacy was good, our collaboration ran smoothly, and we shared similar visions of the future. We could both sit and talk about how someday in the future we would make enough money to buy a nice house, have kids, and let them grow up in a stable yet creative home. I almost feel silly when I think back on it now, but back then, we meant it seriously and it genuinely felt possible. Those first days really were perfect. Every morning I woke up feeling like I'd found my dream life. First, we'd drink our morning coffee and discuss the day's schedule. Then I'd set up our cameras and double-check the audio. Michelle would fix her hair, do her makeup, and plan the verbal content. I was often in front of the camera too, but it was obvious that she was the main attraction. I never felt any resentment about that. I understood my role and I liked it. I spent time refining our graphics, our music, our edits. I loved all the technical stuff, and she loved being the center of attention. It was a perfect division of labor. Sometimes, people in the comments would worry that I might feel overlooked, but I assured them that I was happy. And at the time, that was true. But then came the period when things started to go wrong on a personal level. The strange thing was that it didn't happen all at once, but crept up gradually. Small, belittling comments here and there. In the beginning, I didn't really react. For example, when I had set up the lighting in the studio and we started filming, but Michelle thought it was a bit too harsh against the background, I just went and adjusted it. Then she might scoff or say something like, "Please, how hard can it be for you to understand that we need softer light?" I didn't take it too seriously. I was pretty laid back and figured she was just tired. But the remarks became more frequent, and eventually I realized they weren't innocent. It was clumsy, ignorant, and a bit stupid in every sentence. I tried to laugh it off because I didn't want to believe she was serious. Over time, it got worse. She started commenting on my clothes, how I dressed as if I had crashed into a closet. She muttered that she couldn't show herself in public with me and definitely not in the vlog, unless I wore something respectable. It was ironic, because at the beginning she had bragged about me having a casual, cool style that many of our followers found relaxed and charming. But now everything was suddenly a problem. She said, "From now on, I'm choosing your clothes." At first, I carefully protested, saying that I could learn a bit more about fashion on my own, but she snarled back that I was generally incompetent and that I shouldn't ruin the vlog's development with my caveman style. Eventually, I gave up and let her decide. It felt a bit humiliating, but I didn't want to argue. The next part of the story made me increasingly confused. Michelle could be super affectionate one moment, showering me with compliments, hugging me, saying how much she appreciated me. The next moment, she treated me like I was beneath her. It was like living with two completely different people, and I began walking on eggshells because I never knew whether she'd be in her belittling mood or her loving mood. Our relationship still functioned in many ways. We were doing okay financially, had a lot of trips booked, and had fans who admired us. But when we fought, the insults became more vicious. Sometimes it felt like she was deliberately trying to put me down. I stood up for myself a few times but got the cold shoulder, and I began to feel a growing unease. One incident that stuck in my memory was when she hid my underwear. She was angry after I accidentally woke her up one night when I was putting a battery in one of the cameras. The next morning, I couldn't find my boxers anywhere. Instead, there was a pair of panties. I wondered where she had put my things, and she answered, "If you don't want to go without underwear, you'll wear these, and I hope you understand what happens if you don't do as I say." When I confronted her about how humiliating that was, she just said, "Don't make me angry then." It also showed in the vlog that she was pushing boundaries. She started making small, mocking jokes about me in front of the camera, commenting on my clothes, which she herself had chosen, laughing about my belly, remarking that I had poor stamina in bed, and referring to me as her assistant despite the fact that I was just as much a founder of the channel as she was. At first, I took it as humor, but after the camera was off, she continued in the same vein, just more aggressively. And when I objected, she threatened me. She said she could replace me with someone else who could film, or maybe just do the vlog by herself. I didn't stand a chance, she said, of claiming any part of the vlog if she decided to cut me out entirely. I tried to insist on my rights, but she waved me off, hinting that she could imply that I'd been violent or something else stupid. I couldn't understand how she could talk like that, but the look in her eyes and the tone of her voice were so convincing that I started to get seriously afraid. During this period, it dawned on me that our relationship was anything but healthy. I knew people could end up in destructive relationships, but I never thought that I, who always saw myself as calm and reasonable, would end up in one. Michelle seemed almost unaffected. Sometimes she even joked about how she had me wrapped around her little finger, that I depended on her. It was humiliating to hear, because I realized she was right. She had control over our accounts and contracts, as she handled most of our sponsorship deals and collaborations. I trusted her when she took over the finances because she was good at negotiations, but now it was being used against me. She knew my schedule, my phone, and my contacts, and she had welcomed me into her home, so I no longer had my own apartment. Everything I had was registered under her name, in essence. The account was largely hers. I was completely stuck. It wasn't long before the threats of cheating started raining down. She'd throw out hints that she could find someone else anytime. I didn't believe her at first, but she did everything she could to taunt me. Even though our relationship was toxic, there were times when she was kind, and I clung to those moments. But then came the night when I heard her through the bedroom door. I'd come home earlier than expected from a short recording, and as I passed the bedroom, I heard her talking on the phone. It wasn't a normal conversation. She was speaking sexually to the person on the other end. I stopped in my tracks, totally shocked. She didn't even lower her voice. It was like she wanted me to hear. I didn't know what to say or do. I just backed away from the door and locked myself in the guest room that we used as an editing studio. Later, when I tried to talk to her about it, she called me a worthless nobody, professionally, personally, and in bed, and said that if I wasn't so useless, she'd never need stuff like that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in pure anxiety. That was when, in the middle of the night, I decided I had to leave her. But I couldn't just walk out because who knew what accusations she might hurl at me? Who would people believe? Everyone loved her. She was the face of our successful vlog. I was just the tech guy, the man behind the camera, the invisible partner. And she kept threatening me with all sorts of stories, from assault to sexual harassment, if I tried to leave. I had no money in my personal account. Everything went through the business account, which she had locked down. So I went into survival mode. I thought about gathering evidence of what was going on. I remembered the small microphones we often used during our travels when we wanted good sound quality without visible mics. They can be placed just about anywhere and are very discreet. I thought, why not place a few around the house? Maybe they would capture her verbal abuse and threats. It was a risk because if she found them, she would probably lose it. But I felt I had no other choice. I placed a mic in the bedroom, one in the living room, and one in the kitchen. I did it when she was away at a meeting. Then I made sure I always had my phone recording whenever we were somewhere else and she started arguing or threatening me. It didn't take long before I had a bunch of audio files of her calling me incompetent, weak, a loser, disgusting, and other words I can barely repeat. I also had clips of me telling her to stop and her responding with threats about what she'd do if I tried anything. At least now I felt I wasn't completely defenseless. I wasn't sure if the evidence would suffice legally, but it was a start. The problem was still that I had no money to hire a lawyer. But I managed to contact a law firm. A friend had recommended them. I explained the situation discreetly and said I couldn't pay much at the moment, but that I had material that might lead to a trial, and if we won, maybe legal fees could be covered by potential damages or a settlement. It was a long shot, but the lawyer, a man named David, agreed to at least hear me out. I played some clips for him, and he was shocked. It's very clear that she's being psychologically and verbally abusive, he said. Has she ever been physically violent? I said no at the time, although I certainly felt it could happen. I also told him about all the threats she'd made against me, false accusations of rape and such. He said I needed to be extremely careful. If she went to the police first with allegations, I might have to prove my innocence. That scared me. I mustered my courage and kept recording everything. I was convinced she would eventually show her worst side. And sure enough, it happened. One day, I booked a hotel where we needed to spend the night while filming in another city. Apparently, something about the reservation didn't please her, because when I told her that the room wasn't in the category she'd expected, she immediately snapped that I was an idiot. I was surprised by how quickly her anger escalated. I tried to explain that the hotel only had certain rooms available when I booked, but she kept going. She started with insults. Incompetent, brain dead, unbelievably stupid. I felt sad and angry and told her to stop talking to me like that. She stood up and came toward me. Are you really going to hit me over a booked hotel room? I asked, in some attempt to appeal to her reason. Then it happened. She slapped me across the face. I was literally stunned. I couldn't believe it. Then another slap on the other cheek. I backed away and she just stared me down and screamed, "Get out!" Then she disappeared into the bedroom and locked the door. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened. She barely acknowledged me, and when I tried to talk about it, she completely ignored me. I just sat there, feeling helpless. At the same time, I became more determined to gather more evidence. This was physical violence, a clear case. The problem was that it hadn't been caught on camera. I hadn't been recording at that moment, and none of the house mics were placed to pick up the slaps. But now that she'd hit me once, and I suspected she might do it again, I wanted to be prepared. My next step was to set up two small hidden cameras in the living room and bedroom. They were cameras we usually brought with us on trips to film behind the scenes, so they were easy to hide. I wanted to capture her behavior on film. Of course, it was risky. I was afraid she'd find them, but I did it anyway. I adjusted the angle to get a moderate wide shot. One I pointed toward the kitchen and parts of the living room, and the other I placed in the bedroom on a shelf. I hoped it wouldn't be long before she had one of her outbursts so I could document it. Later that week, we got into an argument over something really trivial. I had picked up food from a restaurant but got stuck in traffic due to an accident on the way back. That made me late. When I finally walked through the door, she complained that the food was probably cold. I explained that I'd driven carefully because there were police cars and ambulances at the accident scene, but she just yelled that I was a bad driver. I said I could heat the food up. She burst into a string of insults. Idiot. Zero competence. Maybe you should wear panties all week. You are the sorriest excuse for a man I've ever heard of. I tried to keep calm and not lash out because I knew the camera was running. But apparently, that made her even angrier. She came at me, and I saw her clench her fist. Suddenly, she punched me in the nose. I tried to duck but couldn't. I fell backward and landed behind our kitchen island. The camera caught her from about chest level and up, but not me as I lay on the floor. However, you could clearly see her body language, how she was screaming and kicking at me several times. I protected my head with my arms. When she was done, she stormed out of the kitchen. I got up, went to the bathroom, and wiped the blood off my nose. I pulled up my shirt and saw bruises from her kicks. I waited until she fell asleep, snuck out, and checked my camera. It was all there, evidence on film that she hit and kicked me. It wasn't a perfect shot of the actual punch, but you could see enough. You could see her rage and how she kicked downward. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I finally had proof, and sorrow that it had come to this. This was the woman I had once loved dearly. That night, I sat awake in the editing room. I took all my recordings and clips and put them together into one long montage. Audio clips of her taunts, her degrading words, her threats, as well as the video clips of her assaulting me and screaming insults. I knew our fans would be shocked, but I was past the point of caring about their reactions. I was just sure I wanted to stop her, once and for all. I also wanted to destroy the vlog. To me, it was outrageously unfair that she might just continue in the same vein and make money off what we'd built together. So I edited all the material into a special episode, with text explaining what people were about to see. I wrote that I, John, was a co-founder of the channel, and that I was publishing this because the truth had to come out. Nothing more. Then I scheduled the upload for midnight and waited. My heart pounded like never before. Once I'd scheduled it, I took my prepared bag and left the house. I went straight to the police station where I filed a report for assault. The police took my report, photographed my bruises, and sent me to the hospital for a checkup. I turned off my personal phone so I wouldn't be immediately tracked. I spent the night at the hospital. I had nose and rib injuries, not life-threatening but painful. When I woke up the next morning, I turned on my phone and saw that I had a ton of messages and missed calls from Michelle. Apparently, she had seen the video by then. She was furious. She sent texts like, "How dare you? You're finished. I'm going to destroy you," and so on. I didn't reply. I just lay there in my hospital bed, thinking I really had nothing left to lose. She had destroyed everything we had. I had nothing left to protect but my own life. Later that day, the police called me again and told me they'd taken action against Michelle. It was a surreal feeling, but at the same time, it confirmed that I'd done the right thing by reporting her and posting the video. Then her texts and calls went silent. She'd probably been taken in for questioning and had her phone confiscated or something. I was discharged from the hospital after a couple of days. The police advised me to lie low and not return to the house until they were finished investigating. So I checked into a hotel, somewhere I could have some peace and quiet and think about my next move. It felt sad to sit alone in that hotel room, scrolling through comments on our vlog, but at the same time, I was relieved to have revealed the truth. Online, the reaction was explosive. Many were in shock as they had always seen us as a perfect couple with great energy and chemistry. Still, there were a few comments from people who weren't at all surprised. Some claimed they'd noticed signs in videos that Michelle was belittling me. Several demanded she be prosecuted. Others hated me for exposing her publicly. In any case, the damage was done. The vlog was essentially wiped out in one go. There was no going back to our usual cheerful travel or food videos after this. Sponsors fled immediately. The account was temporarily shut down by our own partners because they didn't want to be associated with violence, and the fans either jumped ship or launched harsh attacks. Many wrote that they felt deceived, that our vlog was just a facade. And I admit, we were partially a facade because everything behind the scenes was like a ticking time bomb. 2 weeks after this happened, I was back in lawyer David's office. He informed me that Michelle was now suspected of aggravated assault and that charges would likely be filed. I felt relieved. I had been granted a restraining order against her so she couldn't come near me. As for our vlog and the company behind it, it was basically finished. She tried to report me for defamation, claiming I had doctored the footage, but the police had the original files. Plus, I had bruises, hospital records, and earlier recordings of her verbal threats. It was looking pretty bad for her. In a way, it felt like I had lost a huge part of my life. I had spent several years on that vlog, building a platform that was large and profitable. Now it was gone, probably for good. But I still couldn't help feeling it was necessary. I felt a certain satisfaction that at least I didn't have to watch her continue making money off what we had created. She had lost her public face, her career, and any chance of simply restarting was slim because the clip spread like wildfire. No one would forget. She would forever be the woman who assaulted her boyfriend in the public eye. I didn't want to be vengeful, but I had to admit to myself it served her right. I know some wonder if I could have handled it better. Maybe I could have left quietly and discreetly, contacted the police, and kept it all secret, but I was afraid she'd beat me to it with false allegations. And it felt impossible to flee when she controlled everything, from my money to my phone and my home. I needed something dramatic that would break through everything. And the only thing I really had was my knowledge of how to film, edit, and publish quickly and effectively. I used the vlog as a weapon. It's not something I'm proud of, but I don't know how else I would have managed to break free. Now, I'm living a fairly anonymous life. I've gotten some support from my family, who don't live in the same city, but we've been in touch by phone. I feel ashamed that I didn't tell them earlier. I've also been told I should get therapy to process everything, and I think that's a good idea. Over these past years, I've been broken down and diminished in ways I never thought possible. I was so invested in the project and in Michelle that I either didn't see or didn't want to see the warning signs. Now, I mostly just want to focus on having a decent future for myself. Maybe I'll start a new vlog one day. Maybe I'll do something completely different. I'll see what life has to offer. At least the feeling of being free again is overwhelming. I've received many questions from friends and from people who contacted me privately through forums about how I'm doing and whether I ever regret posting that clip. To be honest, I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I feel it was the right thing to do because I exposed the truth and got out of a life-threatening situation. On the other hand, I wish we could have resolved it without our entire career going up in smoke. I used to love vlogging, traveling, exploring hotels, and sharing my tips. I miss that part. But nothing is worth living in hell just to maintain a facade. Having a successful channel means nothing if you're trapped in a destructive relationship. My plan is that maybe I'll return to YouTube or some other platform in the future, perhaps in partnership with someone I can trust or maybe on my own. Right now, I'm mostly occupied with legal procedures and trying to heal mentally and physically. I don't know what Michelle's defense will look like in court. Maybe she'll claim everything was staged or that I provoked her. But I have so much material plus my injuries, so I don't think she'll get away with it. I don't feel any joy when I think of whatever punishment she might face. I just wish it never had to go so far. Sometimes people ask, why didn't you just leave before it turned physical? And it's a fair question, but a destructive relationship can make you mentally confused and afraid. I was afraid of her threats, afraid of being ruined and falsely accused. I was also afraid that no one would believe me. Michelle is charismatic, and she knows how to persuade an audience. So I waited until I had enough evidence. Sadly, that was only when she hit me that I felt certain she could actually harm me physically. That's when I understood there was no turning back. Now I'm sitting here writing all this because I want people to understand what can happen behind the scenes. I also want to clarify that abuse can look very different. Michelle used to belittle me and harass me verbally before it escalated into physical violence. No one is immune to ending up in such a situation, regardless of gender. I never thought that I, who can be quite self-confident in other contexts, would let that happen. But slowly, I stopped being self-confident. I adapted and did everything I could to avoid conflict. I tried to appease her. It's easy to judge from the outside, but it's a completely different story when you're in the middle of it. I also find it hard to let go of the thought of how she could turn so much hatred toward me. When we first met, we were equal partners. I don't know if success went to her head or if there was always a dark side to her. Maybe it was the combination of the power she realized she had and my own weakness in setting boundaries. There's a lot I want to understand, and I think I need professional help to get there. But I want to say this outright. I feel no love left for her today. I mostly feel relief and maybe a bit of sadness about what we could have been if things had stayed healthy.
If you liked this story, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot. and you won't miss out on any future stories. Take care and live your best life.